All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Workshop Wednesday. Today, we're going to be going over snowshoeing. And my name is Mayla. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm a trip leader at the outdoor program, and I've been working at the outdoor program going on 4 years. And I've led quite a few snowshoeing trips and done some snowshoeing in my free time as well. So I'm excited to kind of share what I know about it. And then I have my co-presenter, Ian.
Great, thanks, Mela. Yeah, my name's Ian. I'm an assistant trip leader at the outdoor program. I'm also at the outdoor program, so I'm at the outdoor program twice, once more than Mela. Um, I use he/him pronouns, and about snowshoeing, I do have some experience doing it. I've gone on a number of personal snowshoeing trips, and it's something that I greatly enjoy. I find it to be extremely difficult for all of my muscles, and that's something that I like about it. So happy to share some info about it with you today. And I'm going to hand it back to Mela to continue.
Sweet. So to start off, I just want to do a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. If you could go to the next slide.
Oh, yep, that's me.
Sweet. So first of all, we're going to talk about what the heck snowshoeing even is. And then we're going to teach y'all how to use snowshoes and how to use the other equipment that you might need on a snowshoeing trip. And then we're going to go over some things you want to think about while you're planning your trip. We're going to give some recommendations of spots around Portland. And then we're going to talk about renting gear from the outdoor program. So you should have all the tools you need after this workshop to go on your own trip. Go to the next one. So first of all, what even is snowshoeing? Why would I want to go snowshoeing? So basically, snowshoes allow you to hike in the wintertime. The surface area of a snowshoe allows you to stay on top of deep snow and hike on top of the snow. And they also give you traction so you're not slipping on ice and on the slippery snow. And it's just a really fun winter activity, and it's pretty beginner friendly because there's not a ton of technical skills you need, and there's not a ton of huge risks compared to some other winter activities like backcountry stuff or skiing. And it also gives you access to some really beautiful places and views, like you can see in this picture. This is a picture from one of our trips to Tilly Jane. And then, as Ian mentioned, it's also a really good form of exercise. So lots of good reasons to go snowshoeing. And then some of the main things you need for snowshoeing, of course, the snowshoes. It's also a good idea to have trekking poles, a good pair of boots, and then gaiters are optional, but they can help with some things, which I'll go over here in a second. And then later in the presentation, we'll talk about the other bits and bobs you might need for the trip. All right, so to start off, I'm going to go over trekking poles. And so a reason trekking poles might help you is they're really helpful with balance. They can help with traction and going up steep hills. And then we have a nice little picture here going over the parts of them. You've got a handle with a strap, just helps you keep from dropping them, or if you need to do something with your hands for a second. And then you have the pole itself. These poles here in the picture are like the ones that we rent out. So they extend from 2 points, and Ian's going to show them here a little later. But essentially, when you're using them, you're going to extend them from the 2 points, and you want those to be kind of equal lengths rather than one completely extended and one not extended at all. And you want to extend it to a point where your arm is at a right angle when you're holding it and it's in the snow. And the other part here at the bottom of the pole is the basket and the tip. And the basket just helps to keep the pole up above the snow so you're not sinking down every time you use it. So yeah, those are the poles. And then next I'm going to talk a little bit about boots and gaiters. So hiking boots versus winter boots or snow boots. We rent out winter boots here at the outdoor program, which is a nice resource. And snowshoes are compatible with almost any boot, winter boots, hiking boots, even mountaineering boots, if you're using them on a mountaineering trip. And basically when you're choosing your boot, winter boots are gonna offer you a little bit more insulation. They're gonna be a little bit more waterproof, and they typically have a higher ankle. So all good things for the snow. But if they are new boots to you, if you're renting them, boots do need to be broken in usually. So if you have hiking boots that you're really comfortable in and they're pretty good with waterproofing, you can also wear those. And I would just recommend combining them with a gaiter in that case. And gaiters, as you can see in this nice little picture, go around your calf, and they just add another layer of waterproofing around that area and above your boot. So they can prevent snow from getting into the top of your boot. And putting them on, essentially there's a little leather strap, which you can kind of see on the very bottom of the gaiter. And that goes underneath your boot to hold it on. And then the rest of the gaiter is gonna go around your calf and boot. And then there's a line of Velcro, which you can see in that picture, and that just seals it all the way around. And there's also usually a little hook on the end, which hooks to your laces of your boot. And yeah, that's essentially how you put those ones on. And then getting into the snowshoes themselves, I'm going to talk a little bit about the different parts of them, just so we are on the same page when we're talking about snowshoes later. This picture is actually a picture of the type of snowshoes we carry here at the outdoor program. Ian will go over types of snowshoes here in just a second. But when we're looking at this picture, you can see the main part of the snowshoe, the big red thing. That's what we call the deck of the snowshoe. And then the two ends of the snowshoes, we call the tips and the tails. So just the front and the back. Next, you can see we have the binding in the middle of the snowshoe, and that's how we're going to attach the snowshoe to our boot. So there's just a number of straps there. And then on the bottom of the snowshoe, you can see what's there for all the traction. So we have the rails, which are pointed to with a little green arrow. And then we have the crampon, which is in the center of the snowshoe, the red arrow. And again, that's all gonna help you keep you from slipping when you're on the snow and ice. And then another thing I forgot to mention is on that binding and on that toe crampon, there's a pivot point. So while you're walking, the binding's gonna lift up from the deck. And then you can also add extenders to snowshoes, and that's just gonna add to the surface area of it. And you would just put those onto the tail of your snowshoe, and it makes them longer. And those are good if you have really deep snow, or if you have a heavy pack, or you're just a larger person. And then not pictured on these snowshoes is there's also heel lifts on some snowshoes. And I think Ian's gonna go over that later, but essentially that just keeps your binding in a fixed position higher in that pivot point, and that's helpful for walking up hills and other things like that. So yeah, those are parts of the snowshoe.
100%. All right, thanks a lot, Mela. And I'm gonna jump into the next couple slides, which are kind of my part of the presentation. We'll be talking about the different kinds of snowshoes. And then I'll just take some time to go over a lot of the gear that Mela talked about and that I'm gonna be talking about. Got it all set up right next to me. So you'll get to watch me kind of fumble around with that and get my body into all kinds of awkward positions to show you that on the camera. But first of all, here we are talking about the different types of snowshoes. So the three ways of categorizing them that we're gonna talk about today, because it's not quite as clean of a categorization as some skis and stuff like that, is by application, by material fabrication, and by size. So first of all, we're talking about the applications. And really that comes down to the kind of terrain that you're on. And so the terrains we have here, we have flat terrain, rolling terrain, and mountain terrain. These are the categories that you're gonna see if you go to REI or MSRs, web pages of how do I pick which snowshoes are right for me. And these are kind of the categories that they're broken down into. So you can read these for yourself, but I'll go over them briefly. The flat terrain generally are kind of the more low price snowshoes. You might find a cheap pair of them somewhere without many features. They have simple bindings for boots and shoes, and they have fairly low traction features. So just generally one set of rails, like Mela was talking about, and a simple crampon. And that's kind of it, as you can see in these photos here. And then you get to the rolling terrain ones, which are a little bit more, a little fancier. They have a little bit more of a traction system, a little bit pricier, sometimes made of, somewhat slightly more expensive material or different material. They have simple bindings generally, and they often have a heel lift. It's kind of not 100% on these ones, but generally for rolling terrain, you'll see a heel lift. And you can see it on these right here, this little wire bar that's in the photo, and it's on both of these here on the bottom, not the one on the far left. That's to pop up under your heel so that when you're going up steep terrain, your weight is distributed more evenly on the snowshoe, and you're basically just getting better traction for that reason. Finally, to the mountain terrain ones, they've got probably the highest price out of any of them, the most features. Those features for the most part are just, like more of these lines of grips, more kind of crampon features. And they'll have a slightly more sophisticated binding system, make them work a little better with like mountaineering boots and different kinds of boots, including just larger boots. And yeah, those will be the most expensive ones that you'll buy most likely. Watch out if you're buying a pair for an important mountaineering mission and they're not, in a reasonable price range. Watch out for that. All right, the next one is by size. So, I couldn't find a great picture of what I was looking for here, but essentially there are various sizes of snowshoe, as you can see from this picture, and they go even much smaller than this for people who are doing running. This is the smallest one I could find on the internet, but folks who are doing running on like compact snow can have some really small snowshoes, basically just like normal shoes, but a little bit bigger. So the applications for these kind of depend on the snow type that you're going to and the kind of terrain. So if you're in powder, bigger snowshoes to distribute your weight over more of that super soft snow. If you're in compact snow, maybe wet or something like that, smaller snowshoes are fine. They might be better depending on what you're trying to do. And then the one case that smaller snowshoes are preferred is if you're in like steep and icy, especially just icy situations, they can just help your maneuverability a little bit. So that's kind of why some people might opt to go for, a medium-sized pair if they're purchasing it instead of a super large one. But that's part of what I want to talk about. The other part of what I want to talk about on this page is that when you purchase or rent a pair of snowshoes, they'll come with a recommended weight. This is the recommended load for the snowshoes, and that includes pack weight. And so that's just something to pay attention to because you want to, have that be applicable to whatever trip you're doing, whatever amount of gear you're carrying. Yeah, that's what I want to talk about on this slide. The last one is going to be material composition. These are the three most common ones. We don't have the super old school wood and I guess leather maybe that we used to have, but these are the ones that are in common production now with the mechanical engineers going to town on these designs. So we have the aluminum frame snowshoe. You're likely to find these if you're looking for a pair of snowshoes secondhand. It just seems like there's a lot of them on that market. Their quality, they work. They're the ones that I personally own because you can usually get them pretty cheap. It's a little bit of an older design than this center one, which is, I think, in more common production now. But I mean, it's still totally good. The composite snowshoe is how it's labeled in this. This is exactly the ones that we rent at the outdoor program. But essentially this right here, it doesn't have a heel lift. This is just kind of a flat terrain snowshoe, but maybe you can use it for other applications too, maybe if you're willing to do so. And then we've got an EVA foam snowshoe. This probably out of these most likely has the least traction features. You can tell the bindings are really simple Velcro. And this would be just probably the cheapest one you could purchase, probably around $70 or something like that. Maybe more for this model, but yeah, those are the most common materials. Of course, there's the vintage ones, the wicker ones, but that's what you're dealing with today if you're looking for snowshoes. All right, so we're past that. And I think now is when I was planning to talk about, I'll show you the equipment later. We'll talk about this first. So there are a couple strategies we wanted to mention to you regarding the use of snowshoes. So it would be great if we could, do a live demonstration and be in the snow with you, showing you how to do these things. But the best I can do is kind of a verbal communication and maybe throw the snowshoes up in front of you to demonstrate these things. But the first technique is the duck walk, wide steps, duck walk. So this is referring to not wide steps necessarily, like your feet are super duper far apart and you look ridiculous, but like your feet are at this angle and you look kind of ridiculous. The idea behind the duck walk, it's something similar that people can do with cross-country skis. I think it's called the herringbone in that, but it's essentially, since you know that especially flat terrain snowshoes have these two rails, but not necessarily like the most grip laterally in this way. You can help yourself up like a really steep slope or something by having your snowshoes at this kind of angle. That'll just give you more force up the hill. Well, more, I guess friction would be the thing that's helping you get up the hill in that case. But that's the idea behind the duck walk. You'll see folks doing it and if they get into a steep situation. Alternating steps with trekking poles. So this one comes intuitively to most folks, I think, but making sure that when you're using trekking poles, hiking or snowshoeing, you generally want to have the trekking pole alternating. So say your right foot stepping forward, you want that left hand trekking pole to be moving forward at the same time. There's a really great video on the internet. I think it's a WikiHow video of how to use trekking poles, and it gets it totally wrong where they're just using the trekking poles with the same foot. You can look that up, it's great, but it's not true. You absolutely want to be alternating. The idea is then you're basically forming kind of a tripod with that trekking pole and both snowshoes or feet if you're just hiking. So that applies to hiking as well, but definitely follow that advice. And sidestepping. Mela can correct me if my technique is wrong on this one, but I believe sidestepping would be kind of like the extreme of the duck walking scenario. And that would be, say you've got a really steep hill that you're trying to walk up. Instead of walking up with that duck walk technique, you kind of just walk up the hill sideways like this. And it's pretty awkward, difficult to move quickly like that. But as long as you're making sure to keep those snowshoes flat with the snow, not, trying to keep them not like flat like this, but like with the actual angle of the snow, then you're going to have your traction as high as it can be basically in that scenario, just because you're making full use of the rails. You would want to do that in powdery stuff mostly. I think that it's standard technique if you're in an icy situation to really use the crampon part, which is the part that is right here, as we talked about earlier, and you'd want that to be facing up. I think there's some difference there in crampon use between like the French and American techniques, but that would be my advice, is to use the crampon part for an icy situation. And avoid backing up. This is a good one. So backing up, since snowshoes have kind of that pivot point with your foot, they're designed really well since, the smaller amount of the snowshoe is in front. They're designed really well for going forward because the front lifts up naturally and the back kind of drags a little bit naturally. But if you try to walk backwards, you will get yourself into a tough situation because the snowshoes just love to dig into the snow, make it impossible. At the outdoor program, when we do trips, and Mela's laughing now because she knows what I'm going to talk about. When we do trips in like a winter environment or training trips, we'll almost always have a game where, you're wearing snowshoes and you have to go do some kind of obstacle course, like run up to a pole and then run backwards or something. You have to actually run backwards and someone always falls and it's great. So avoid backing up. That's legitimate advice right there. And yeah, that takes us to the end of this. Now we're on to the next slide, where we're going to talk about putting snowshoes on. I'm going to demo it, and we're going to just briefly run through all that other gear. All right, let's see. How do we want to talk about it through the slide? So there are right and the left. Do a little quiz style, see if you can figure out, if you were like looking down at this snowshoe and you were going to put it on, which side you would put it on. And then I'll just quickly reveal the answer. So essentially, when you put it on, the bindings go underneath these. Mela, what are these called? These little metal bits? Do you happen to know?
I don't know, hooks?
Okay, yeah. Dang it. There was a different term for them that I was thinking of, but you put it under the hooks. That's official ODP terminology. And then run it back. And so in the end, what you want to remember is that you want this big clumsy part, depending on the size of your feet, especially, it could be really clumsy, to be not on the inside, which would make this the right hand snowshoe. And I'm really hoping that this isn't like flipped around in the video or something like that and that it really is true to it. But essentially you want this on the outside, so not between your feet. And so I'm gonna demonstrate putting this on. When you're putting them on.
Do you wanna stop sharing so your
Yes, thank you.
Picture will be big?
Stop share. All right. I'm hoping that my picture is the one that's big in the video. Mela, would you mind, this is rude, would you mind muting yourself temporarily just so that to make sure that Zoom is like putting my thing up in the recording? Thank you. All right, so you've got, with this style, you've got 2 straps in the front and then 1 on the back. I've seen some that have, 3 on the front or something like that. But the way that you want to do it is you want to adjust your foot to be in the correct position with your toe behind this thing so that it's not going over. You want it to be fairly well behind it. And then you want to put the top straps on. And then you want to put the back strap on and tighten that really hard. So I'm in an awkward position here with the camera, but we're going to do this. How's that looking, Mela? Good? Great. So I'm making sure that I've got some clearance here. So even if I tighten the back strap a little bit, that's not going to hit my toe. Otherwise, the snowshoe wouldn't be able to rotate. Oh, yeah. I'm sure you can see exactly what I'm talking about. All right. So normally you would be putting these on with winter boots, and I'm a little bit foolish for thinking I could just do it with normal shoes. So what's happening is essentially the cables are just a little bit kind of awkwardly long for the size of my shoes, and my shoes are getting super squished, but it's fine. We're gonna make it work. All right, so now I've got these things on the outside. If I were to put my other foot up, which I'm gonna do now, those will be on the outside. My burrito socks are showing. And then after that, tighten the back one. All right, so I've got a snowshoe on. Once you get it on, you're gonna wanna give it a shake, make sure it doesn't fall off. Make sure nothing feels too tight or too loose. Too tight, you could cut off circulation and get really cold really quick. Too loose, you're gonna give yourself blisters or something like that. Let's see, other things to note. I didn't mention this, but when I was putting them on, you may have seen I tucked these straps into these little, I don't know what they're called. I guess they hold straps, so we can call them a strap holder. That's a good way to kind of keep them out of the way where you need them, off on the side where they're not going to get in your way. You can kind of see that if this was the other way, if these were over here, they would probably be bumping into each other and causing me all kinds of problems when I was walking. So that's why we do it that way. And I'm going to take this off, but you can see I've still got full range of motion there, and I've managed to get it tight around my foot. So that's a functional snowshoe. That's the end of that super fun demonstration, and I can commence a blood flow in the normal way. My body is up right now. A couple of other pieces of equipment that I wanted to show off that Mela was talking about. Trekking poles, we're at the outdoor program. Mela was talking about when you extend them, you want to extend both parts. So these are the 2 parts she was talking about. This part and this part. A lot of trekking poles will have on the bottom part kind of a specific marker to say like bring it to here and then do the next one. These specific ones aren't exactly like that, but let's say I were arranging these for myself. I would put the bottom one out pretty far because I'm kind of tall and I just know that that's what I have to do. And then I'd keep this second one loose. Mela was talking about that 90-degree angle. So this is once you've got your snowshoes on, you want it to be 90 degrees. And so that's about 90 degrees. So I'm just gonna lock it right there, assuming that I still have the snowshoe on. That would be my trekking pole. Slip my hand through here. And you can keep most of your weight on the strap when you're using it. So that's trekking poles in a quick nutshell. The next piece of equipment Mela mentioned was gaiters. I'm not gonna put this on because I accidentally grabbed a small. But essentially, as Mela said, it's got a little hook in the front. You probably can't see that very well, but that will go over your, on the front of your boot, touch your laces. Opens up like this, goes around the top of your boot. Velcros up, it's great, they're great. They will save you a lot of cold and wet socks. And then the last thing I want to talk about, the extenders. We have them at the outdoor program. You can rent them most places that you can get snowshoes. And when they're on the snowshoe, they make it look like this, as opposed to the shorter that you can see right here. So that will definitely, if you're carrying a heavy pack, you can use those. Definitely recommended. I think that's all the gear that I wanted to go over. So I'm going to start sharing again and hop back over to the presentation. All right, that was our live demo. So that brings us to the end of this slide. All right, planning your trip. So the planning things here are kind of specifically pertinent. I designed it to be a little bit specifically pertinent to snowshoeing or winter adventure trips, where knowing avalanche forecasts and some other stuff that's in here is specifically important, but there will be a part 2 to this, planning your trip. Just know that this is just a few of the initial things, and then we'll go over gear, stuff like that in the next slide. So pick a location that you have appropriate gear into those types of snowshoes. So not doing mountainous terrain in, flat snowshoes, especially if you don't have, enough experience. But you could do flat snow and mountainous snowshoes, but not the other way around. Checking weather, avalanche forecasts, and snowfall history where you're going, which would affect the type of snow, maybe the kind of snowshoe you need. Again, you probably already have your snowshoes or you know what you're getting. But avalanche forecasts are pretty important. You don't want to be going into a super high risk zone. So we do have a winter risks workshop that talks about that if you have some questions about that, or you can just do some research on Google. Checking avalanche risk near where you're going. Checking weather is really important for winter trips. Snowfall history will tell you a lot. The more you know about avalanches, the more it'll tell you about that, but it'll also tell you how powdery the snow is, stuff like that. Check local permit regulations. It's annoying to get out there and know you have to have cash and you don't have cash, something annoying like that. Snow park permit is something you'll need to pick up. I always pick mine up on Sandy on the way to Mount Hood. And let someone know exactly where you are, where you're going, and when you'll be back, and try to plan to bring someone with you. It's not written here. Try to plan to bring someone with you. That comes down to just how inherently risky being on the snow is. Lots of dangerous hazards. Check out our winter hazards video if you're interested. Other things related to planning your trip, really briefly, the speed. In powdery snow, it can be pretty slow. Expect 0.75 to 1.5 miles per hour. Base walking speed for most people is 2 to 4 miles per hour. So that's slower. And then in compact snow, you can expect it to be almost as fast as walking. Yeah. Winter hazards, check out the winter hazard workshop. Plugged it again. All right. Planning your trip part 2. Mela put most of this slide together. Props to her. So other things that you want to bring when you're thinking about your gear, when you're planning that, good layers, preferably non-cotton. You will get warm. You seriously will sweat snowshoeing. You may think you won't, but it's just a little harder somehow than walking. Don't know why. We talk about this in Wrist and Layering. Go watch it. Snacks and water, really important to stay warm. If you run out of snacks, or water, you could find yourself in a tough spot pretty easily. It's a great thing to bring more of it. Bring a bunch of water in the car, fuel up with water before you hit the trail, because you won't want to drink it while you're out there probably. Your body's it's cold, feels weird to drink water. The water's freezing, but you've got to keep drinking water, 100%. First aid, Google what first aid stuff you need. A headlamp, just in case, always bring a headlamp. Backpack for all your things, sweet. And then we mentioned the 10 essentials here. You can Google that and just pull up images. It'll have tons of stuff like that. REI, a bunch of places will have the 10 essentials for you. Basically, it's like sun protection and shelter, fire, things that you should have in any kind of trip like this. So I believe, were you going to take this slide, Mela, or did I agree to take this?
I can talk about this one.
Sweet, yeah. So I'm going to hand it over to Mela to wrap up the presentation.
Yeah. Thank you for your awesome live demonstration, Ian. And now we just want to talk a little bit about some of our recommendations of good places to go snowshoeing pretty close to Portland. If you ever went on trips with us, these are places we would take our snowshoeing trips. This picture here is another one from Tilly Jane. You can see you walk right through a burn area on the Tilly Jane Trail, which is pretty cool. You can see that awesome view of Mount Hood. Tilly Jane is an out and back. You go up actually to an A-frame. You can eat lunch up there. And then it's 5 miles round trip, but it is a really steep one. So you gain about almost 2,000 feet of elevation on that one. So have to be ready for a good workout for that one. We also have Trillium Lake, also up by Mount Hood. That one is a loop, and it's about 4.5 miles around the lake, and that one's pretty flat. And if it's clear, you also get some good views of Mount Hood and where the lake would be. It's frozen, so you can't actually see the water. But there's also some pretty good birding over there because of the wetland. And then White River, again, up on Mount Hood. That's at the White River Snow Park. That's another out and back. You can follow the river, and that's about 4 miles round trip and only about 800 feet elevation gain. So those are some of our like 3 favorite trips that we take our snowshoe trips on, but there's also tons of other trails around Portland. And if you're traveling farther, there's lots of trails like in Bend and in other areas of Oregon. So you can definitely find lots of good recommendations online as well. And then just to quickly go over our rental policies, if you want to rent snowshoes and get out there. First of all, the difference between members and non-members, since all of our pricing is divided that way. So if you're a student, you're automatically a member of the rec center and the outdoor program. You pay student fees towards that. And then if you are a faculty member or an alumni, you have the option of paying that rec center fee and being a member as well. And then we also rent out to non-members, which would be all community members. And it's just a higher price, which you can see here in our price list. So for snowshoe packages, and that is the snowshoes and trekking poles, it's $12 for the first 4 days for a member. And we have pricing set up that way, typically for a weekend. So picking up on Friday and returning on Monday would be a 4-day rental, which is pretty convenient. If you do want them longer than that, then it's going to be that extra day price, which you can see is $3 for the snowshoe package. And you can kind of just look at the rest of the pricings here. It's a little bit less expensive if you just want snowshoes. We also, again, rent out those snow boots and gaiters, which are only $5 each. So it's pretty inexpensive for an activity. And yeah, we provide all the gear you need. So this term and next term, we are open Monday. Oh, I made a typo here. We're not open Wednesdays. We're closed Wednesdays for cleaning our gear and equipment. But we're open Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday from 2 to 6 p.m. So super bad typo. Sorry about that. And you can make a reservation for equipment up to a week in advance. So the Friday before you want to go snowshoeing, assuming you're going on a weekend, you can give us a call and rent your snowshoe package. We usually don't sell out unless it's like a holiday weekend or we have a rental special going on, but it is always good to make a reservation just in case. And our office is on 5th and Harrison. So if you have been to the rec center, it's the same building, but we have our own entrance down on the first floor. So we're right around the corner from the bike hub, if you know where that is. So yeah, hopefully you can rent some snowshoes from us. And then that's basically all we have for y'all today. Hopefully you feel super ready to go snowshoeing now. You're a certified, knowledgeable snowshoer. We went over how to use the snowshoes, where you can get them, and some options of where to go. And then we also just want to let you know if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to us. We have our ODP email here. Our phone number was on that last slide. We also have Instagram and Facebook. And then we also have a beautiful picture, which was created by snowshoeing. So if you're really bored sometime, you could go replicate this. But yeah, thank you all so much for tuning in, and hopefully you can come to our next workshop, which is going to be about winter camping.
Yeah, we hope to see you there. Thanks a lot for joining. If you made it this far, you're awesome. All right.
Bye, everybody.